Keisha woke before dawn, long before the sky turned pink. She sat on the edge of her small bed, listening to the soft hum of the broken refrigerator in the next room. The cold air from its cracked door escaped into the kitchen, but the motor never kicked on. In the dim light, she could just make out the empty shelves. She rubbed her eyes and reached for the simple gold necklace resting on her nightstand. It was thin and unadorned, but to her, it held everything she loved and lost. The apartment smelled faintly of damp concrete and last night's cooking. Outside, a distant siren faded, and the city stirred awake. She stood and stretched, careful not to wake her daughter Ayana, curled under a threadbare blanket. The child's soft breathing was a comfort, even in these hard hours before daybreak. Keisha slipped the necklace over her head and let it rest against her heart. It warmed her in more ways than one. She moved to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator door. A single half-empty carton of milk stared back at her, its contents spoiled days ago. She shut the door gently, as if afraid the carton might vanish or come alive. Near the corner, a few string beans lay limp in a crumpled bag. No eggs, no butter. The small broccoli head she had bought last week was yellowing. With each glance, her heartbeat sped up. She counted the cost of fresh milk in her mind, but the numbers made her stomach knot. Keisha knelt by the counter and pulled open the drawer. It held only receipts, tangled hair ties, and a faded photograph of her on her wedding day. She paused to trace the outline of her younger self, brighter eyes, tighter smile. That night, she had worn this same necklace. It had belonged to her mother, who pressed it into Keisha's palm with a soft warning. "Keep it close, child. It carries our love." Her mother was gone now, and the gold chain felt as fragile as her own hopes. Ayana's room to gather her courage. The toddler already fussed in her sleep, kicking off her blanket. Keisha paused in the doorway, brushing back Ayana's curly hair and murmuring, "Mama's here." She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She was alone in the world with this little life depending on her. There was no one else to call, no magic to find. Only herself and the choices she would make. The day before, Keisha had cleaned 3 houses for Mr. Wallace, the only steady client she had. He paid her $20 each visit, and she hoped to find other work, but jobs were scarce. She stored her cleaning supplies in a plastic tub under the sink. She pictured herself scrubbing floors and dusting cabinets, doing whatever it took, but the pay never matched the work. Sometimes she went a week without a call. Her bank account hovered just above empty, and rent would be due in 5 days. She walked back to the kitchen and stared again at that bad milk. She pulled open a small drawer in the stove, a makeshift pantry. Inside lay only 2 handfuls of rice and a few dried beans. She could make a thin soup, but even that required water and a firing flame. The thought of Ayana drinking soup instead of milk made her chest ache. Babies needed milk. She closed her eyes and imagined her daughter's smiles at breakfast, reaching for the bottle, gurgling with delight. That vision felt like a distant island she could not swim to. Keisha gathered her few coins and looked at the bus schedule. Taped to the fridge, ride to the market cost 25 cents each way. The milk cost $2.90. In her purse she found only $2.50. 5 cents short, she shook the purse again, nothing else. Shh. Tapped the necklace resting on her chest. It was worth more than any grocery bill, but she did not want to let it go. Not this morning. Not when it felt like part of her mother still lived inside that small link of gold. A soft cry came from the living room. Ayana, half awake, put her tiny fist to her mouth. Keisha scooped her up and held her close. The child nuzzled against her, and Keisha whispered promises she didn't fully believe. "We will have milk soon," she said. "Mama will find a way." Ayana reached out for the necklace and giggled when it caught the light. Keisha forced a smile, trembling inside. She clenched her jaw and shifted her daughter to one hip. Weight of the world pressed harder now. She placed Ayana on the couch and opened her phone to check messages. No new work offers, no calls from old friends, just silence. She thought of her father, who left when she was a baby, never sending a single letter. She had no family to turn to. And yet, in this tiny room, a small glimmer of hope remained. It came from her mother's words, etched in her memory. "You are stronger than you know." She let those words fill her as she held Ayanna close. Night came again sooner than she liked. Keisha sat at the small kitchen table, the single bulb overhead flickering. She placed a mug of water before Ayanna, who sucked at it gratefully. No milk, but water would do for now. Keisha reached into her purse and counted one more time, still $2.50. She tucked the purse back into her coat and wrapped her coat around Ayanna's shoulders. The apartment door clicked behind her as they stepped into the cool night. They walked block by block toward the corner store. Neon sign buzzed overhead, its blue glow harsh in the darkness. Inside, the clerk glanced at them but said nothing. Keisha laid her coins on the counter and picked up the small carton. Ayanna's eyes widened when she saw it. She reached for the milk with both hands, and in that moment, Keisha almost changed her mind. But the coins were gone. She could not afford bus fare back. The tears she swallowed burned her throat. She cradled Ayanna and carried the milk carton home on foot. The wind bit at her cheeks, and Ayanna hummed softly, unaware of the sacrifice. That night, Keisha placed the baby to sleep and closed the door behind her. She set the milk on the shelf and stood in the empty kitchen, the single light casting long shadows. She touched the necklace beneath her shirt, feeling its cool metal through her skin as she closed her eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring harder choices and hoping she had the strength to make them. You said. Part 1. Crow. Expand KRO. Without heading 1,300 words, Keisha woke with the sun yet to rise. The small kitchen was cold and silent, except for Ayanna's soft whimpers from her crib. Keisha sat on the edge of the worn sofa and rubbed her tired eyes. She felt the weight in her chest grow heavier with each breath. She stood and wrapped her coat around her daughter before heading to the kitchen. The half-empty milk carton on the counter had gone bad again. She opened it and smelled the sour liquid. Her heart sank. Ayanna needed fresh milk. All the rice and beans in the pantry could not fill the warm, creamy need of her child's hunger. Keisha counted her coins on the table. $2.50. Not enough. She pressed her fingers hard against the edge of the table, as if that could squeeze more coins into her purse. She had bus fare to think of too. The corner store was close enough to walk, but carrying Ayanna in her arms for that many blocks in the cold was hard. Still, the baby needed milk. Keisha closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought of the gold necklace resting against her heart, hidden under her shirt. It was worth much more than $2.50. She could sell it today and get enough for a large carton, plus bus fare home, and maybe even a little extra for tomorrow. She pressed her palm to the necklace through the thin fabric of her shirt. Her mother had worn it before her, and now it lay warm against Keisha's skin, as though it were alive. She thought of her mother's gentle voice, telling her how the necklace carried the love of their family. She imagined her mother's smiling face, and tears blurred her vision. She thought of Ayanna's bright eyes, her laughter, her tiny hands reaching for the world. Keisha closed her fist around the necklace, as if holding on to both her past and her child's future. She could not let go. Yet the milk must come first. She paced the small living room with Ayanna swaddled against her. Her coat was thin, and the wind whistled through the cracks around the front door. She remembered last winter, when she had almost lost the baby to a fever because she could not pay for medicine. She refused to let that happen again. Every step led her closer to the hardest decision she had ever made. She took out her phone and checked messages. None. She scrolled through old photos of herself and her mother. One showed them laughing. In a garden, the sun glinting on the necklace, her mother held the chain between her fingers, smiling at the camera. Keisha tapped the photo and stared at it. She felt a sharp ache in her chest. A soft cry came from Ayanna. Keisha pressed her fingers to the baby's back and helped her settle. She whispered, "Mama is here. I will do what I must." She kissed Ayanna's forehead. The little girl smiled and poked her tongue out. Keisha smiled back, though her heart trembled. She fed Ayanna a few spoonfuls of watered-down formula from a half-used box. The baby drank eagerly. Keisha wiped her mouth and stood, the empty spoon in her hand. She looked around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time. The peeling paint on the walls, the single bulb in the hallway, the threadbare rug on the floor. It was all she had, and now she was about to lose something more. She stepped outside, the door clicking softly behind her. Ayanna nestled against her chest, warm and trusting. The morning air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed the cold. She walked toward Main Street, her steps steady, but her heart pounding. Each block felt like a mile. She practiced what she would say, "I need money. I have this necklace." But those words felt wrong. The necklace was more than just gold. It carried memory, love, history. Still, her daughter needed milk. The jewelry shop's sign swung gently in the breeze. Its window glowed with soft light. Inside, rows of precious stones and metal gleamed under glass cases. She paused on the sidewalk and took a steadying breath. She could turn back, find another way, ask someone for help. But she had no family to call, no friends to trust with her secret. She opened the door. A tiny bell jingled overhead. The shop smelled of polished wood and metal. A man in a crisp shirt and dark vest looked up from behind the counter, smiled. Politely, his face was kind but careful. "Good morning," Keisha said, her voice small. She unwrapped the necklace from beneath her shirt and held it out on trembling fingers. "I need to sell this." The man took it gently, as though it were fragile. His eyebrows drew together, and his smile faded. He studied the chain, turning it this way and that, catching the light. He ran his fingers over the clasp, his breath. Shallow Keisha watched him, her heart in her throat. He opened a small drawer beneath the counter and drew out a velvet pad. He laid the necklace down and nodded to himself. Then he reached for a small scale and tested the weight. Keisha felt the blood rush in her ears. He stood and stepped behind her. He cupped the necklace in his hands and offered her a number. $20, he said gently. Keisha blinked. $20? The number felt like a blow. She had hoped for more, but it was enough for milk. She nodded. Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. He counted the bills and placed them in her open palm. She tucked them into her coat pocket and felt the weight of the gold chain slip from her neck. She pictured it resting on the velvet pad behind the glass. It seemed so small there, like an empty promise. She turned and fled from the shop, the door jingling behind her. Outside, the air felt too bright, too cold. She held Ayanna tighter and walked as fast as she could toward the corner store. Step carried the ache of loss. She would have sold a dozen things before she sold that necklace. But what choice did she have? The baby needed milk. She whispered apologies into Ayanna's hair, though the child simply yawned and settled closer. At the corner store, she laid the bills on the counter and picked up a large carton of milk. The clerk smiled and nodded. Keisha tucked the carton into a plastic bag and handed the clerk the bills. She counted the change, then handed it back. She did not need it. She held the bag tightly and turned toward home. The city woke around her. People hurried past without glancing. Cars rumbled by. The sunrise painted the sky pink. Everything felt the same, yet nothing was the same. She carried Ayanna and the milk home, step by step. Each footfall echoed her mother's words, "My love moves with you." She pressed her palm to her shirt where the necklace once lay, vowed to find a way to bring it back. For now, she had done what she must. She cradled her daughter and whispered, "You will never go hungry because of me," Ayanna cooed, wrapped in the warmth of her mother's voice. Though Keisha's world felt smaller without the necklace, her heart grew larger with the promise of tomorrow too. The next morning, Keisha woke to a restless ache in her chest. The gold necklace was gone, and with it went a part of her history. Yet when she looked down at her daughter's bright eyes, she knew she had done the right thing. She rose quietly, so as not to wake Ayanna. In the kitchen, she poured a cup of coffee from the thermos she had filled the night before. Its bitter warmth spread through her hands and offered a small comfort. In the corner of the table sat the empty milk carton, a reminder of yesterday's desperate choice and today's hard lessons. She set the coffee down and began to unpack. The small bag of groceries she had bought, a full carton of milk, 2 loaves of bread, a block of cheese, and a few apples. It was more food than she had seen in days. She cut a slice of bread, spread cheese on it, and handed it to Ayanna, who, ate eagerly. The sight of her daughter's happy face warmed Keisha's heart. She smiled, though tears still lingered behind her eyes. Guilt and relief swirled inside her like a storm, but she pushed them aside and focused on the moment. After breakfast, Keisha dressed quickly and slung her worn tote bag over her shoulder. It held her cleaning supplies and a stack of resumes. She had an interview today with a small catering company downtown. She hoped it would be a steady source of work. As she left the apartment, she paused in front of the mirror. The gold chain was gone, and her neckline looked bare. She touched the spot where it used to rest and felt only the soft fabric of her shirt. She took a deep breath and walked out into the busy morning. The bus ride was crowded, but she held Ayanna in her lap. The little girl pointed at the passing buildings, chattering happily. Keisha returned her smiles, though her mind raced with thoughts of the necklace. She wondered where it was now. Perhaps it sat behind a glass case, shining under bright lights. She wondered who would wear it. She wondered if she would ever see it again. At the catering company, the manager greeted them kindly. He admired Ayanna's curls and asked if Keisha could start part-time on Monday. It was not much, but it was a start. Keisha accepted gratefully, promising to bring her daughter to work in the afternoons if that was okay. The manager smiled and said he would make space for Ayanna in the office. Keisha left with a renewed sense of hope, clutching the small envelope. With her schedule and pay rate on her way home, she stopped by a community center to pick up diapers and formula donated by a local church group. The volunteer wrapped a bag for her and offered a gentle prayer. Keisha thanked her and stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. She felt lighter than she had in days. She settled Ayanna in the stroller and pushed toward the bus stop. She walked. She noticed the jewelry shop on Main Street still stood where she had sold her necklace. The sign above its door read Thompson's Fine Jewelry. For a moment she stopped, her heart hammering in her ears. She turned away quickly, as though she might see the chain displayed in the window. The next day, Keisha returned to work at the catering company. The hours were long, but honest. She carried trays of food, wiped down counters, and swept floors. Each dollar she earned felt like a victory. At night, she returned home tired but content, with enough food to fill her pantry for a couple of days. Yet every evening she peeked at the spot where her necklace once lay on the nightstand. She missed its cool weight, its promise of family, its memory of her mother's love. Early one Saturday morning, Keisha decided to visit the jewelry shop. Again, not to sell anything she had nothing left that she could part with, but to clear her mind. She told herself she wanted to see the necklace behind the glass, just for a moment. She smoothed her hair and left Ayanna with the neighbor, Mrs. Flores, who wanted to help. "Go ahead, dear," Mrs. Flores said with a warm smile. "Keep an eye on her." Keisha nodded gratefully and hurried toward the shop. The door chimed as she entered. "Mr. Thompson." The jeweler looked up from polishing a ring. His expression was cool and professional. He did not recognize her at first. The necklace on display glinted under the lights, but it was not hers. The cut of the pendant was different, the chain thicker. Keisha drew closer to the glass case and studied the pieces. None matched the simple gold link she had owned. She felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. At least her exact necklace was not among these. But where was it now? Before she could ask, Mr. Thompson approached. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. His tone held no warmth, but it was courteous. Keisha shook her head. "I'm just looking," she said, though she wasn't certain what she sought. He nodded, stepped back to his polishing cloth, and continued his work without another word. Keisha felt a strange chill. She turned and left the shop, the bell's jingle following her out. Over the next week, life for Keisha settled into a fragile routine. Work at the catering company, mornings at the community center for baby supplies, evenings trying to save a little money. Each dollar she managed to set aside felt like a step toward reclaiming her necklace. She searched online for secondhand shops and pawn stores, but found nothing that resembled her heirloom. She worried someone had already melted it down for raw gold. One Sunday, she took Ayanna for a walk in the park. The sky was clear and blue. The air smelled of summer grass and distant barbecue, Ayana climbed on the swings, giggling as Keisha pushed her gently. As the child soared back and forth, Keisha watched the jewelry shop across the street. Through the tree branches, she glimpsed Mr. Thompson at the window, adjusting a new display. She noticed the necklace she had sold. It hung on a small stand, its links shining softly. Her breath caught. It was smaller than she remembered, and the light touched it differently. But it was unmistakably her chain. She felt her knees go weak. Ayana, as she slid from the swing and held her close. She watched as Mr. Thompson examined the chain, turning it slowly on his finger. He seemed puzzled, as though he could not place its origin. Then he set it back on the stand and turned away, unaware that the woman who once wore it stood just feet away. Keisha held back tears. She wanted to storm into the shop and demand it back, but she knew she could not. She had sold it fairly, even if the price had been low. It had helped her daughter survive. So she swallowed her pride and led Ayana home. Yet in her mind, she made a promise she would one day get it back, no matter what it took. That evening, Keisha sat at her desk and wrote in a small notebook. Under the heading, Dreams, she listed her hopes: steady job, safe home, and the return of her necklace. She pressed her pen against the paper and felt the weight of her vow. She closed the book and tucked it under her pillow. The small clasp of hope tightened around her heart, even as the empty spot at her neckline reminded her of what she had lost. Late that night, she was jolted awake by a soft knock at her door. She tiptoed through the dark apartment, Ayana stirring behind her. She opened the door a crack to see Mrs. Flores standing there with a concerned look. "I saw you today, dear," she said softly, "at the park, staring at that shop. Are you okay?" Keisha nodded, her voice catching in her throat. She sighed and stepped aside to let her neighbor in. They sat at the kitchen table under the single flickering bulb. Mrs. Flores poured 2 mugs of tea and handed one to Keisha. "I know how much that necklace meant to you," Mrs. Flores said gently, "but you did what you had to do. You saved your daughter." Keisha sipped the hot tea and closed her eyes. The steam warmed her face and cleared her mind. "I know," she whispered, "but it was my last tie to my mother. It was everything. Mrs. Flores placed her hand on Keisha's. "Your mother's love lives in you now, and you carry it forward every day." Keisha looked at her friend and gave a small, weary smile. The night deepened, and Mrs. Flores left. Keisha sat alone in the dark, holding her mug as though it were a lifeline. She thought of the necklace behind the glass, gleaming with cold light. She thought of Mr. Thompson's face when he first touched it. She thought of her mother's words, "Keep it close." She realized that even without the chain, she carried her mother's strength inside her. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the street below. The city slept beneath the moon, unaware of the small dramas playing out in its apartments and shops. Keisha pressed her hand to the glass and whispered, "I will see you again. Mama's necklace. One day, I will bring you home." She turned away and climbed into bed with Ayana pressed against her side. As she drifted into sleep, she felt her resolve grow stronger. Tomorrow, and every day after, she would find a way to reclaim her past, to build a future worthy of her daughter. Keisha woke before dawn again, her mind restless. Last night's promise to her mother's memory echoed softly in her heart. She rubbed her eyes and looked at the empty spot where her necklace used to rest. Instead, she saw only smooth skin and a faint scar from where the chain once lay. She sighed and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Ayana stirred beside her, opening her eyes and blinking sleepily. Aisha smiled and whispered, "Good morning, little one." She reached down to scoop her daughter into her arms and kissed her cheek. Ayana giggled and stretched, ready for the day's adventure. Keisha made a quick breakfast of oatmeal and fruit. She let Ayana dip her little spoon into the warm oats, laughing when some dripped onto her shirt. Keisha wiped the mess away and admired her daughter's delight. Serving food had become a joyful moment for both of them, even in times of struggle. She packed a small bag with diapers, wipes, and a change of clothes. In the other pocket of her coat, She hid her notebook, her dream book, where she had written down the day she would reclaim her necklace. After breakfast, Keisha dropped Ayanna with Mrs. Flores, who welcomed the little girl with open arms. Keisha hugged her neighbor tightly. "Thank you," she said softly. Mrs. Flores squeezed her shoulder. "You're strong, Keisha. Don't lose hope." Keisha nodded and tucked her notebook into her tote bag. She had decided today would be different. She would learn more about the jeweler, about Mr. Thompson, so she could understand how he valued her necklace. Maybe then she could find a way to get it back. She arrived at the jewelry shop just as the sun rose over the city rooftops. The sign still read Thompson's Fine Jewelry in polished letters. Keisha paused outside the window and looked in. Mr. Thompson was already at work, polishing a ring under a bright lamp. He moved with careful precision, his brow furrowed. As he cleaned each facet, Keisha watched him for a moment, memorizing his routine. She noted how he greeted each customer, a polite nod, a quick smile, a respectful question. He seemed kind but reserved, as if he kept himself at a distance. Gathering her courage, Keisha opened the door. The little bell jingled overhead. Mr. Thompson looked up, surprised to see her again. She offered him a small smile. "Good morning," she said. I brought something by." He set aside his polishing cloth and straightened. "Hello, Miss Johnson," he said. "Back so soon?" His tone was polite but curious. Keisha held her breath. He did not call her by name, only Miss Johnson, as if he did not know her. She swallowed her disappointment and nodded. "Yes, I thought maybe you could tell me about that necklace I sold you." Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed. He motioned for her to follow him behind the counter. Keisha stepped forward, her heart pounding. He reached into the velvet-lined drawer and pulled out a small folder. He opened it and looked inside. Keisha leaned forward, straining to see. It was a certificate of appraisal, dated 3 days ago. It described a vintage gold chain, mid-century design, handcrafted links, appraisal value $350. Keisha pressed her hand to her chest. The number was more than 15 times what he had paid her. She realized then that he had given her a low offer on purpose. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "I appraised it myself," he said softly. "I had to authenticate its design, check its purity, weigh it. This certificate shows its value." He tapped the paper. "Your necklace was well made. A skilled artisan crafted it. It's rare." Keisha stared at the document, her breath caught. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Why did you pay so little?" Mr. Thompson's shoulders slumped, folded the certificate and tucked it back into the folder. "I thought you needed help," he said. "Offered you what I thought was fair, given your situation." He paused and looked away. I should have been honest. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. She had trusted him in her most desperate hour. If he had told her its true worth, she might have asked him to hold it longer, to come up with a better plan. But she had taken what he gave because she had no other choice. She turned away, trying to steady her voice. "I only sold it because I had to feed my daughter," she said. "I had nothing else." Mr. Thompson placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said. "I see you working hard. I see you fighting for your child. I admire that." He guided her to a small chair behind the counter. She sat, surprised. He closed the glass case and locked it. Then he motioned for her to stand, placing the certificate and the original appraisal on the counter in front of her. "I want to make this right," he said. "I cannot change the past, but I can help you now." Keisha looked at him, unsure what he meant. His lips formed a small, sad smile. "Here is the difference in value," he said, pushing a stack of bills across the counter. $330. "Take this, and please keep the chain's memory close." Keisha's hand hovered above the money. She felt overwhelmed by gratitude and shame. She shook her head. "Can't," she whispered. "It's too much." Mr. Thompson gently lifted her hand and placed it on the bills. "You've earned it," he said. "It's yours." He turned away, clearing his throat. Into the silence, he added, "There's something else." He reached behind the counter and pulled out a small box. He opened it slowly, revealing the gold chain, gleaming softly in the light. I found this with other items you sold. He said, I kept it safe. Keisha closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. The necklace lay there, just as she remembered it, thin, unadorned, perfect. She reached for it, cradling it in her palm as if greeting an old friend. The cool metal brushed against her skin. She felt her mother's presence. She felt her daughter's. Future. She choked back sobs and pressed the chain to her heart. Mr. Thompson watched quietly. After a moment, he said softly, I'm sorry it took me so long to realize who you are. Keisha looked up, puzzled. He gestured toward an old photograph, hanging on the wall just behind her. It showed a younger man and woman standing in front of a small jewelry workshop. The woman was smiling, the same simple gold necklace glinting at her throat. The man beside her wore a proud expression. That woman was my wife, Mr. Thompson. Said in that little girl, it was you. His voice trembled. Keisha stared at the photo. It was a picture of her as a toddler, wearing the very same necklace. Her mother stood beside her, holding her tiny hand. Behind them was the jewelry workshop where her father worked. Keisha's knees went weak. She sank into the chair and covered her mouth. She had always believed her father had abandoned them. She had blamed him for her mother's loneliness. And now here he was, her father, Mr. Thompson, the kind jeweler. He knelt before her and took her hand in his. I left because I was too proud, he said, tears in his eyes. I was young and foolish. I let my pride keep me away from you and your mother. When she died, I realized the worst mistake of my life. But I never found you until now. Keisha's heart pounded as the truth sank in. She looked down at the necklace in her hand, then back into his eyes. Father, she whispered. He nodded, his lips trembling into a smile. Yes, Keisha. He rose slowly and wrapped his arms around her. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. All the years of loneliness, guilt, and unanswered questions melted away. In that small jewelry shop, behind the glass cases and polished counters, father and daughter reunited at last. They sat together, talking softly. Mr. Thompson explained how he had searched for her after her mother's death, but had lost the trail. He described the heartache he carried every day, hoping she was safe. Keisha shared her struggles, her jobs, her dreams for Ayanna. Tears flowed freely as they filled the empty chapters of their lives. After they had spoken, until their voices grew tired, Mr. Thompson stood and held out his hand. In it lay a simple velvet box. Inside was a new gold necklace, just like the heirloom, but with a small engraving of two names, Keisha and Ayanna. Keisha's eyes widened. He smiled and said, Now you both can carry our family's love into the future. She placed the necklace around her daughter's neck and felt hope bloom in her chest. The weight of the past no longer felt like a burden, but a bridge to a brighter tomorrow. Father, daughter, and granddaughter stood together. The heirloom returned, and the future shining with promise. Early the next morning, Keisha woke to a gentle knock on her apartment door. She sat up slowly, the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. In her hand, she still held the small velvet box containing the new gold necklace for Ayanna. She smiled at the promise it represented. Carefully, she opened the door to find Mr. Thompson standing there, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee in paper sleeves. He offered one to her and smiled. She took it, feeling its warmth seep into her hands. They walked together to the bus stop. Ayanna perched on Keisha's hip, wearing the little necklace that matched her mother's old chain. The city was just waking. Birds chirped from the power lines. Neighbors swept their stoops. Keisha felt full of hope and a little disbelief. She turned to her father, calling him by his first name as he preferred Samuel, but also feeling the comfort of a parent's presence. He carried a small bag of bagels from the bakery around the corner. The scent of fresh bread made her stomach rumble. On the ride to the jewelry shop, Samuel asked about Keisha's plans for the day. She told him about her new part-time shift at the catering company and how she hoped to start saving money for a bigger apartment. He nodded and suggested that she come by the shop after her work. He said he had a surprise for her, but did not say more. Keisha's heart fluttered with curiosity and hope. Arriving at the shop, Samuel unlocked the door and held it open for Keisha and Ayanna. The morning sun streamed across the polished glass cases, making every gem sparkle Cha had never seen. The shop so bright. Samuel led them to a small back office, where a simple wooden desk stood. On it was a neatly folded stack of papers and a set of keys. "These are the papers for the small apartment above the shop," Samuel said. "It's been empty since last year. It's one bedroom, cozy, safe. It's yours if you want it." He pushed the papers toward her. Keisha's breath caught. She read the pages and saw her name on the lease. She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "You've already done so much." Samuel shook his head gently. "You've earned it, Keisha. You work hard. You provide for Ayanna every day. I want to help you build a home." Keisha closed her eyes and pressed a hand to her heart. She looked at her daughter, who reached up to touch Samuel's hand. Then she looked back at her father, his eyes steady and kind. She nodded, her voice soft but firm. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." Samuel smiled, relief shining on his face. He handed her the keys and they left the office together. That afternoon, after her shift, Keisha returned with Samuel to see the apartment. It was small but bright, with a window facing the street and a tiny balcony where potted flowers could grow. The walls were freshly painted in a soft cream color. The kitchen had a counter for cooking and shelves for dishes. The bedroom fit a bed and a dresser. Best of all, it felt like a real home. Keisha imagined Ayanna playing on the floor, the sunlight warming her face. She saw herself cooking dinners, folding laundry, and tucking her daughter into bed without fear of eviction. Over the next week, Keisha moved in, carrying boxes of clothes, toys, and kitchen utensils. Samuel helped her paint the balcony railing and install shelves in the kitchen. Every night, they sat together at the small kitchen table, drinking tea and talking about childhood memories. Keisha learned about Samuel's own struggles after he left the family and how he built this jewelry business from nothing. She shared her hopes and fears. Their bond grew deeper with each conversation. On Saturday, Samuel took a rare day off and surprised Keisha with a gift. He brought her a simple gold ring, engraved with her mother's initials. "This is from your mother's collection," he said. "She wore it on our wedding day." Keisha held the ring in her hand, feeling the smooth metal and the history it carried. She slid it onto her finger and felt her mother's love surround her. She looked at Samuel and whispered, "Thank you for everything." He reached across the table and took her hand. "We are family now," he said. "We take care of each other." Life settled into a comforting rhythm. Keisha worked at the catering company in the mornings and helped Samuel in the shop in the afternoons. Sometimes she polished silver trays. Sometimes she helped arrange flowers beside the jewelry cases. Ayanna came with her, playing quietly in a corner with building blocks. Customers smiled at the sight of father, daughter, and granddaughter working side by side. Keisha felt proud of her small but happy world. One evening, after Ayanna had fallen asleep, Keisha and Samuel sat on the balcony, sharing a bowl of popcorn. The city lights twinkled below. Samuel handed her a letter. It was an invitation from the community center to speak about her story, how she found strength in hardship and the redemptive power of family. Keisha hesitated. She was shy, afraid to speak in front of people. But Samuel squeezed her hand and said, "Your story can help others. You are brave." Keisha looked at the letter and swallowed. "I'll try," she said. When the day came, Keisha stood at the front of the small hall, Ayanna on her lap and Samuel in the front row. She told the audience about her struggles as a single mother, about the necklace she had sold, and about the father she thought she had lost forever. She spoke of the kindness of strangers, the warmth of community, and the power of forgiveness. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as she remembered her mother's words and felt her daughter's steady heartbeat against her chest. At the end, the audience rose and applauded. Keisha felt tears of joy and relief. She looked at Samuel, who nodded proudly. That night, Keisha tucked Ayanna into bed and kissed her forehead. She then sat alone on the balcony, the cool air on her skin, and closed her eyes. She thought of the journey she had walked from the cold, empty apartment, the broken refrigerator, the harsh decision to sell her only heirloom, to the reunion with her father and the gift of a home. She thought of the new necklace around her daughter's neck and the ring on her finger. She felt gratitude wash over her, filling every corner of her heart. In the days that followed, the little family celebrated small victories. Keisha's hours at the shop increased, and she learned to repair simple clasps and polish stones. Samuel mentored her, teaching her the craft he had perfected over decades. Keisha dreamed of one day opening a small jewelry stand of her own, where she could pay forward the kindness she had received. Ayanna grew stronger every day, her laughter echoing through their home. On the first anniversary of her mother's passing, Samuel and Keisha walked to her grave together, Ayanna toddling between them. Samuel held the bouquet of her mother's favorite flowers to Zena's hand. Keisha knelt and placed the flowers on the fresh stones. She whispered, "Mama, look at us now. We're a family again." Samuel placed his hand gently on hers, and Ayanna dropped a single daisy to the ground. They stood together, the three of them united by love and memory, as they walked away. The sun broke through the clouds, casting light on their path. Keisha looked at Samuel and Ayanna and felt a peaceful joy she had never known. The necklace still rested against Ayanna's chest, shining softly. The ring on Keisha's finger caught the light. Their family history, once broken, had been woven back. Together with care and grace, together, they walked toward the future, stronger, wiser, and bound by the unbreakable link of love.